Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Hey gang, before we get started, I want to remind everyone with the storefront that I now have at tpublic.com. It's an awesome way for you to buy Uncle Josh merchandise and support my channel, but don't stop there. They've got awesome designs from all kinds of people. Browse that website to your heart's content. Follow the link that is in the description below of this video, and if you're following me on social media, the links are there as well, but make sure you click on that link to go right to my store. Right now, you can buy all kinds of merch with the Debonair logo, the original Scully logo, and of course, the Scary Forest logo. I'm working on uploading some more designs and including the original Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories skull. Look for that soon. Make sure you click on the link in the description below or what's on social media. It'll take you right to my store. Having said that, everyone, sit back, relax, and enjoy a few creepy and strange tales about the 4th of July. Bad Cop, submitted by Junie P. When I was 19 years old, my parents went away for the 4th of July weekend to have an adults-only weekend. That left me alone in my house to do something I had never considered before: have a party. We had the normal rules I'm sure everyone grew up with. No one over without permission, no underage drinking, and certainly no parties. My parents weren't complete stick-in-the-muds. They would allow me to have friends over and have a few beers or wine, but only people they knew and if they were staying overnight. That was about as far as their permission was until I was of legal age, and every time they had to be there. Most of the time, well, actually all of the time, the parents of my friends who were over were also okay with it. But here I was, alone and ready to make an unbelievably stupid decision. I decided to have a party. I was going to keep it outside on my patio and yard with no one allowed inside, and everyone had to stay in the backyard. I live in a pretty rural area, so my neighbors are not right up on top of our house, and I figured if we kept things fairly low-key, there wouldn't be any problems. So I invited about 15 or so people, which grew to around 20 or 25 with hangers-on and extra people being invited. But that was it. One of my friends was 21, and he got a keg of beer and brought over some other stuff for people who didn't drink beer. We ordered pizza and stuff like that for food, and everyone came over around 6. We were having an awesome time, some people getting a little more drunk than others, but nothing was out of hand. My boyfriend was running a little bit of security, so to speak, to make sure that no one went in the house and no one got crazy. I mean, everyone was just chilling and having a good time. Someone did bring some fireworks, and I also didn't think that that would be a big deal, as people out where I live shoot fireworks off all year round, it seems. No big deal. And no crazy show was going to be put on, just the normal sort of stuff you can buy in a package at a fireworks store. Most everyone was planning on crashing at my house, some sleeping on the patio, and others had prepared better and brought tents and sleeping bags. They'd set them up around my backyard and around my fire pit. As the evening wore on, we did start a fire and just continued drinking and playing drinking games and having a blast. When it got dark, the fireworks came out, and we were all having a good time with that as well. I know I'm saying good time over and over, because it was a really good time. Until the bad time came. At 11:30 or thereabouts, there was a deep voice from the gate of the fence near my house that separated the backyard from the front. I have 2 dogs, who are not afraid of fireworks if anyone's going to ask about that, and the backyard had to be fenced in to keep them in so they could just roam around. I went over to see who it was, and my heart sank as I realized it was a sheriff. I went over and he asked who lived there, and I said me. And he said, "Okay, please open the gate. We've had a complaint about noise." I knew I was dead right there and then. I mean, some of the people at the party were of age, but the majority were 19 like me. The sheriff came back and asked exactly that. Who was old enough to be drinking and who was not? A lot of people lied and said they were 21, but that looked like it wasn't going to work when he said he was going to call someone else out to help him check everyone's IDs. Then he pulled me aside again and asked if my parents were home or if they were aware that I was doing this, and I said no to both counts. I figured at that point there was no sense in lying. He looked at me for a hard minute and his radio went off. He said something on his shoulder about he was fine and could handle it, and then he turned back to me. Everyone in back was now really quiet as the music had been turned off and people were just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. My friend Sarah came over to get a better idea of what was up, and the cop told her to get back with the group of people in the back. She asked if there was anything she could do to help, and he really roughly said, "If you don't live here, this isn't your problem." He was pretty much a dick to her. He asked me to come out to his car with him, and he got out a notebook. I could see people over my shoulder trying to get a glimpse of what was going on at the fence. But when we came around the house and got closer to his car where he had parked, they couldn't see. He asked me how many people were there, how long we'd been drinking, and then I noticed he wasn't writing anything down. We were just standing by his car, and that's when he said, "There's another way we can take care of this." That's all he said. I think he was trying to get it to sink into my head of what he was getting at. I asked him what I could do to make sure that this wouldn't get into a worse situation, and he said that was up to me. When he said this, his hand dropped to his waist and he kind of patted at his right thigh. I got the picture pretty fast. If I gave him a blowjob, I wouldn't have any more problems. I was terrified. I could not believe he was asking me this. I mean, as a stupid teenager, for a second I thought, fine, I'll do it and get it over with. But then the almost adult in me kicked in and said, no fucking way was I going to do that. I didn't know this guy from Adam. I didn't know how often he did this, and I'm certainly not going to get some disease from some prick cop trying to get me to go down on him. I stuttered a few seconds trying to buy some time, and he got out this other book which I could tell were tickets or something. He said, "Here's your choice. You can do it one way or another. You decide." All of the blood rushed into my head, and the beer I'd been drinking wasn't helping at that moment. I felt dizzy and in shock. And thankfully, something happened that I thank God for over and over and over. Another patrol car pulled into the driveway, and another sheriff got out. He walked over to us and asked how everything was going. And the original sheriff looked at me and told me to stay by his car, and he walked away with the other guy. They talked for a while, and then both came back to me. I quickly found out the second sheriff was actually the first sheriff's boss. He told me the ramifications of what everyone was up against at the party, but then he had a change of heart, and he said, "Look, we have enough other bullshit going on tonight that we don't need to be hassled with this shit. I don't want to see one of these vehicles leave this property tonight. I will be checking, and I'm writing down every single license plate. If anyone leaves this property tonight, there will be arrests made, and you're going to have to face some consequences." He looked at me very sternly and said, "Keep it down. No fucking around, and no one leaves this property. Do you understand me?" I shook my head and said, "Yes, sir." He then said if he heard one more complaint and had to come back out here, the same fate awaited everyone at the party. Once again, I said, "Yes, sir, I understand." They both talked again and then drove off, and I went back to the party to explain what had just happened. I couldn't believe it still. This guy, and I understand we were breaking the law, wanted me to give him a blowjob to overlook what we were doing. I remember in an episode or two back, Uncle Josh, you said you got an email from someone saying something about telling stories about crooked cops. Well, here's one, and this is something that lasted longer than this party. I've run into that sheriff since then, more than once, and I've been harassed by him more than once for nothing. I've been stopped for quote-unquote speeding by this guy when I wasn't, and I was actually stopped in the town I live in for jaywalking by him. And other stuff, too, at other times. It gave me a sad sense of who people are in this world. I certainly don't think all sheriffs or cops are bad people. But what he said to me that night scared the shit out of me. It made me see a side of life that I had never considered before. The same people who are supposed to serve and protect us and uphold the law can also be people who can seriously hurt and damage others for life. I can't imagine what I would be living with had I done that. And I also think about how many other people took him up on his offer. The rest of that night was okay, and we all kept it kind of low and just kept drinking quietly. Everyone stayed and no one got in trouble. But I'll never forget that sheriff. What he did that night, what happened afterwards, and what didn't happen that night and afterwards. Thank God his boss showing up out of nowhere. And I also always think about how he harassed me afterwards. Was he thinking that I was finally going to do it? I no longer live in that town and I don't have to deal with it. But holy shit. I suppose people would sit back and say that's not super scary or anything. But hey, until you live it, keep your comments to yourself. It was something very unnerving, and I'll never forget that 4th of July for as long as I live. Creepy 4th of July by Anonymous. It was the 4th of July, and me and my mom, my dad, and my brother, Evan, all went to my mom's friend's house for fireworks. When we got there, one of Evan's friends named Gage told us that the house was haunted. I kind of believed it, but I was also on the fence. Everyone agreed we should go and poke around, so we went upstairs to investigate while our parents were outside setting up the fireworks. When we got upstairs, no one was behind me, and all of a sudden the lights started flickering. I turned around to see if anybody was messing with the switch, but there was no one there. So I quickly rejoined my friends, and I was terrified with all the others of what was going on. Then Gage told us that a guy named Ron had died in the house way back when. He also said there was some strange activity in the bathroom. So I went in there by myself as everyone kept walking down the hallway. While I was standing in there, my shirt got pulled 3 times by something unseen. I ran out of there and then stood in the hallway pretty scared. I could hear Gage talking in a bedroom, so I went in to follow his voice. Gage said that things had happened in that room, but Ron had died in his sister's room, which was another room. So we all went in there, and you could just feel this sick feeling inside. I sat on the bed while my brother and his friend Gage went into a closet, and they sat down and closed the door, and we all heard this whispering. I asked them if they were the ones whispering, but they said no. They came out of the closet, and Gage stopped in his tracks. There was a TV against the wall, and he said, "Look." We all looked into the black screen of the TV, and behind us we saw a black shadow walking back and forth. At that point, I didn't care what was going on, and I ran out of the room like someone was chasing me. Everyone else came running out too, but Evan got stuck in the covers, and we could hear him calling for our help. No one went to his aid, and he finally got out on his own. We were all going down the stairs, and our family called us that the fireworks were going to start. When we got into the yard, I looked back at the window of the room we had just been in, and saw a man's face and shape standing there. It wasn't any of our family members because everyone was outside. I called to my friends and said, "Hey, come and look at this." And they looked up and saw it. But when we turned around to tell our parents, and then looked back, it disappeared. I never went back to that house again. Dad Takes on Creeps, submitted by Randy with an I. When I was a teenager in the late 90s, my family always had a big 4th of July party for my extended family and a lot of people in our neighborhood. It was sort of like a block party, but just at our house. 5 or 6 families would all descend on our property to spend the day playing games, eating food, and just enjoying the 4th. We always had it at our house because we had a big in-ground pool and a big piece of yard for lawn darts, badminton, volleyball, stuff like that. I always looked forward to that day as a young woman because it was a chance to flirt with other guys and still hang out with my girlfriends and family. It was a big deal every year, and this year was no different than the others. Except for one thing. The party was crashed by 2 older teenagers that started to cause problems. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We had spent the week before prepping for the party, and my dad's friends were coming over what seemed like every night, dropping off coolers and stuff for the day. They all had it down to a science and never really waited until the last minute. Everyone wanted everything there before the big day so we could just all enjoy it, not have to worry about setting up and stuff like that. My sister and I was 15 and she was 16, would help out, as would my younger brothers. It was always a team effort and always a lot of fun, and I think over the years people heard about the party outside of our neighborhood, and others outside of our neighborhood were often invited too. That's the only way we figured out how these two creepers showed up to spoil things. So I'm going to fast forward to the actual day. It was mid-morning and people were starting to show up and get things ready with the grill, and also parked for the parade that went past our neighborhood a few streets down. We lived off the main drag in my village, so it was easy for everyone to just walk down there and check that out and then come back to the party. My girlfriends and my sister's girlfriends and I were all just enjoying ourselves, lying out by the pool and occasionally jumping in. Food was all over the place. People were enjoying games and playing cards, and more than the occasional beer was being consumed. Us kids didn't really, although my sister and I did sneak some. Rebellious youth, I guess. No one got drunk, for sure. In the afternoon, though, maybe around 4 o'clock, we were all just hanging out by the pool again, and everyone was laughing and splashing, including the adults. My sister then asked me who these two guys were that were having some beers and hot dogs. They looked to be in their late teens, and I wasn't familiar with them. I said, I don't know who they are. And then we began to ask around. I actually thought one of them was really cute, and my sister said he'd been checking me out and then punched me in the arm. We were all so innocent. We immediately assumed they had been invited, and I thought they were related to someone else at the party legit. As the day wore on, some people left, but more people actually came as the fireworks that my town shot off could be perfectly seen from our backyard. So the party always went well into the night and well past the fireworks, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. These two guys, who we were not really sure who they were making their way around everyone and actually started talking to other people. They said their names were Bo and Scott. Scott was really cute, and he was the one that was giving me the eyes. And at that time I didn't have a boyfriend and was kind of giving him eyes too. A mistake on my part when I look back on things. My mom asked me to get something out of our garage, and I went in there to our refrigerator to fetch whatever it was she asked me for. It must have been food or something, but I can't really recall at this point. This Scott guy followed me in, and I didn't realize it at first. I was rummaging around the refrigerator trying to find out exactly what my mom wanted, when I felt a hand on my ass. I jumped and turned around, and there was Scott. I didn't know whether to laugh or be pissed off because for the short time that I had seen him, I was kind of smitten by him. I eventually said, "Please don't touch me like that until I know you better." And he just smiled and said, "Well, I'd like to know you better." I could smell the beer on his breath when he leaned in to give me a kiss, and I just shot my head to the side so he kissed my cheek. I said, I've got to get this to my mom, and grabbed something random out of the refrigerator, nothing what she had asked me for. I was kind of butterflies inside, but I also wasn't looking to get myself in any trouble. So I ducked underneath his arm and ran back outside of the party. I immediately went outside and told one of my girlfriends what had happened, but was interrupted by my mom, who said, "Randy, this is not what I asked you to get." So back to the garage I went with my friend Mandy. Scott wasn't in there, so we just got what we needed and left. The party went on and I lost track of Scott and Bo, but I would run into him later in my kitchen when I went to the bathroom and was just hanging out in the cool air for a minute with Mandy and my friend Stacy. Scott came in and said hi, and we were all sort of talking, and my friends were giggling and eventually ran back outside. I was left alone with him again. This time he was way more aggressive and grabbed me and tried to kiss me on the lips, and I struggled to push him away. He kept saying, "Let's get to know each other better. I really like you." I finally pushed him away, but his hand got caught on the string of my bikini top, and it came off. I went to slap him, but realized that I was going to drop my top completely, and I grabbed at it and just screamed, "Get away from me!" Any feeling I had that I wanted to get to know him more ran right out of me. This was not cool. My next-door neighbor's dad heard me yell and came inside to see what was going on. But all he saw was this guy standing near me holding up my bathing suit, so he just said to the guy, "I think you need to come outside with me, young fella." He grabbed Scott by the arm and dragged him outside. After I got my suit back on, I also went outside and saw Scott and Bo now yelling at my dad and my neighbor's father. My dad was holding a flipper for the grill and finally just said, "Look, you're not wanted here. I don't know who you are. No one knows who you are. You certainly weren't invited, so it's best if you just leave now." He didn't say it in a very nice tone, but he still was being polite. My dad is an Army veteran who didn't take shit from anybody and had a very colorful mouth, but he was also fair and level when he needed to be. He wasn't trying to make a scene, he was just trying to get rid of these guys. They started to leave, and then I heard Scott mutter something under his breath like, "Fuck this party and fuck you," to my dad. That's all it took. My dad grabbed him by the back of the neck, led him to the gate in my fence, and forcefully threw him through. He then turned to the other guy, Bo, and said, "Follow your buddy, now." They left, and my dad asked me if I was okay. I told him what had happened, and he just wanted to make sure that I was okay, and I told him I was fine. He said, "All right." But then he said, "Tell your friends to keep an eye out for those guys if they come back. They're not welcome here." So the party went on into the night, and we watched the fireworks, and everything was back to normal. Or so we thought. People were still hanging out around tiki torches at tables, playing cards, and all the kids were still jumping in and out of the pool. My friend's little brother was jumping off our diving board when something pinged right off the board in front of him, and then went into the water with a plop and a loud sizzle. Then came something else that shot overhead. It was just a bottle rocket, but it was odd. I'm sure people in our neighborhood blew fireworks off well into the night, but we had never had any come over our house before. Then something else fell into the pool and started spinning around underwater and was changing colors. It was obviously another firework, but dangerously close to people in the pool. Everyone started yelling and scrambling out of the pool, and everyone began looking around to see what was going on, and I heard some laughing off to the back of our property. Suddenly, from where I heard the laughing, there was a barrage of firecrackers, and bottle rockets began raining down on the party. Everyone went into a panic and was running to get under covered areas. All of the dads were grabbing for the kids, and the moms were taking them to safer places as fireworks just seemingly were falling all over the place. This was not our planned party. This was a dangerous situation. A couple of people did get hit by some fireworks and did have some burns. My dad and my next-door neighbor's dad started to look around the yard and pinpointed where all the fireworks were coming from, just the way I did. My dad yelled for someone to call the police as the fireworks kept being shot into our yard, now a little more targeted. But then my dad and my next-door neighbor took matters into their own hands like bosses. They disappeared for a minute, then came running out of our garage, and in their hands they both held long tubes of what I was come to realize were Roman candles. After clearing everyone out of the way, they let them rip and began walking towards the back of our property. Round after round of Roman candle fire shot into the trees at the edge of our yard. I was wondering how they could hold on to the tubes, as they must have been hotter than hell, and then realized they were both wearing heavy garden gloves. When one set of tubes had been used, they pulled more out from the back of their shorts and let those fly, and continued to shoot at where they thought the other fireworks were coming from. A couple of little fires did break out in some dry grass, but then we began to hear two voices yelling out in pain. Oh my! Scott and Bo jumped up from their hiding place, and for some reason, instead of running away, ran into our yard. This made them perfect targets for my dad and my next-door neighbor's dad. They began to pelt them with Roman candles, and finally the two morons got the hint and turned and ran back where they came from. They were howling in pain as the red and green balls were nailing them in the back, and everybody at the party began to cheer and clap as the guys ran away into the night, not to return. Once they left, everything calmed down and people who had been hit by fireworks were looked at, and no one was severely injured. The police showed up, and my dad said when he talked to them, He told them that some guys had been throwing fireworks over at us, but had stopped and had not come back. No one made mention of the Roman candle assault at all. The police told us they hoped we'd stay safe and reminded everyone who was not staying at our house or in the neighborhood that if they were drinking, not to drive. I remember the 2 cops being really cool. So yeah, that was the 4th of July where creepers tried to ruin things. One tried to make out with me and probably tried to rape me in the end, but didn't succeed and ended up getting their asses handed to them by my badass dad and my badass neighbor's father. We had parties every year after that, well into my 20s, but I never saw Scott and Bo again. No one knew where they came from, and I'm pretty sure after that night they knew to stay away. Good riddance, and I'm glad you got what you deserved, you creepers. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature you'd like to hear narrated on my podcast and channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, check out my storefront at tpublic.com. It's a great and fun way to support this channel. Make sure you use the link in the description below. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And of course, you can follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description as well. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can find me on Patreon. A link's in the description as well. Everyone, have a safe and happy 4th of July if you're celebrating. If you're not, be safe and happy anyway. And remember to be excellent to each other. Until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.